March 2018 is already upon us. We have a new moon in Pisces and a full moon in Leo and Virgo. Also Mercury retrograde, Mercury debilitated, Venus exalted, Jupiter retrograde, and a few other pretty important things. So check it out. So talking about March, this is the forecast for March 2018. So March 1st, we have the full moon in Leo, which is a day of fiery emotions and passions. This full moon in Leo is opposite the sun in Aquarius, where there's a lot of planets. These emotions may be very individualized and kind of selfish in nature. We want to try to connect with a pure, clear feeling, rather than the emotions that are more self-driven. You know, fire, which is Leo, has a quality of individuality, but how do we define ourselves? Do we define ourselves as the true self, which is a being of light? Or do we define ourselves by how much light we can attract from others? I'm the source of light. You know, look at me and watch me, this separate being, shine. That's the lower quality of Leo. Whereas when we define ourselves as the light, it's look at how the light I am shines and illuminates your life and illuminates your mind and consciousness. This is why in many ways Leo is the most generous sign. So today there is a quality of generosity on this full moon in Leo, March 1st, unlike others. You know, unlike other days and unlike other full moons, but again, we have to come to a point of self-awareness. So it's a good day to spend time with those who you can shower your light on. So friends and family, be the source of light. Also, if you're a teacher or any kind of healer, it's good for that as well. And it happens in the nakshatra of Purva Falguni, which is ruled by the god of delight, called Bhagha. And it's the sign of, it's the part of Leo that can be perhaps a little indulgent at times, because it's good to be the king, it's good to be that powerful being, but sometimes again we just want to keep the pleasure and happiness and good stuff for ourselves and be sort of the lazy king sitting back eating grapes with the concubines. Hey, it's not bad if you can get it, but it doesn't facilitate your higher awareness. The best that the king can do is share the power with the kingdom. And so again, this nakshatra of Purva Falguni is really the one where we delight in sharing the power we have, rather than hijacking other people's, you know, power or money like a lazy king who says, I deserve all the riches. So then, March 3rd, Venus and Mercury are established in Pisces, where they're going to be for the next few weeks. Mercury is debilitated in Pisces, Venus is exalted there. So early March we're having a kind of Pisces experience, because the sun will then be coming in Pisces later. But Venus exalted, Mercury debilitated, you know, makes for a couple different situations. Obviously there's this sort of devotional quality that we would get from Venus, but then that devotion tends to override our intellect and our discrimination. Sometimes we can just be blindly devoted to something that we haven't figured out, which is the problem when Mercury is weak. But devotion in itself has its own wisdom that is, you know, that allows us to rise above all the equations of the intellect. So notice where you might just feel this elation and this devotion, but you might not be able to put it into words, and you might feel like, you know, what am I doing? This is not, you know, the most sensible and smart thing for me. And so, you know, Venus and Mercury will be there for about the next month or so, but actually Mercury winds up being in Pisces for the next couple months, because he also turns retrograde, which I'll talk about later in the forecast. He turns retrograde March 22nd, March 23rd. So Mercury winds up staying in Pisces until May. So March 7th through the 9th, the moon is in Scorpio, where it's debilitated, and the emotions can be pretty stormy with jealousies and frustrations on those days, March 7th through the 9th. So try to keep your head and mind and heart pure and not allow them to be overtaken by jealousies and, projections. Of course, the good thing to do when the moon is debilitated is get on the yoga mat, do your devotional practices, and, put into practice those things that you say you understand rather than just talk about them, right? So this is happening after, Mars has just left Scorpio. So there's been quite a bit of Scorpio energy now the moon is there. So March 7th through the 9th, be aware of that fiery and stormy emotional nature. In the middle of that, March 8th, actually, Mars leaves Scorpio and enters Sagittarius, where it's going to be for the next couple months until early May. So Mars is also going to join Saturn in Scorpio for the next, join Saturn in Sagittarius March 8th for the next couple of months. And so shows how we're pretty fired up around our principles and ideas and also around our opinions about those philosophies, ready to fight for them. So it can be really good for putting your teachings into practice. Your teachings is Sagittarius, putting them into practice is Mars. Saturn is also there, so it really brings a kind of relentless focus and commitment to your inspirations and inspired purpose. Again, that's March 8th through early May. But also, having Mars and Saturn both in Sagittarius, we can blow some things up, get into some battles, especially over our big philosophies and big principles and our big teachings. We're ready to fight and defend and destroy those who we think are wrong. So you can look for some real philosophical battles in the world. Of course, that includes things like the world of politics and all of that. March 8th through early May, look for some real philosophical battles. And also look for them in your life and in your immediate environment. Like I'm in the astrology world, a lot of philosophies and a lot of sort of potential battles in that world. I wouldn't be surprised if some of those things blew up in between early March and early May, especially with Mars-Saturn joined. Also might show some frustration with authority figures. Again, this is kind of the catalyst for the blow-ups. Like, for example, those in your industry, or let's just use astrology as an example, like the well-known astrology establishment, let's say. The up-and-comers, ready to fight and, sort of destroy the lack of integrity or something like that. See that in your life, ready to sort of rebel against those who are in charge at work because of some big philosophical disagreement. So again, the thing is to fight to change those things, but to not be disagreeable, right? To be patient, to be strategic, not just turn into a crusader, right? You don't have to destroy connections and your relationships with people in order to make progress. So March 9th, Jupiter turns retrograde, where he'll be retrograde for the next 4 months. So he's turning retrograde in the sign of Libra. Jupiter has been in Libra. So when he turns retrograde, we wind up reflecting on our principles and our philosophies and things like that. Now, those philosophies and principles have been very much Libra in nature for the last several months, since Jupiter went into Libra last, it was October. And so this is why we've seen a lot of Jupiter-Libra kinds of issues. I've talked about this quite a bit, the Me Too movement, and we've seen all of that start since Jupiter went into Libra. Now, here in the US we had this gun violence thing. Now we have a Never Again movement. This is very much Jupiter in Libra. Larger social justice, right? Because the social part is Libra and Jupiter is the justice. So now we're going to see Jupiter go retrograde, where we kind of reflect on these things and maybe recalibrate. Now, in your personal life, you've seen this as well. Libra is about relationship. And again, Jupiter is about justice. Relationship justice. Are you being treated fairly? Is it everything you had hoped? And is it time to reflect on your, not just your relationship? Again, we're always ready to look outside. Yes, you're right. I'm not being treated. I'm breaking up. Maybe it's, yes, I have unrealistic expectations. I'm also not treating them fairly. Maybe I need to look at myself. This is actually what retrograde brings, because we usually focus all of it externally. Yes, I'm being treated unfairly. It's not fair. When it goes retrograde, it's like, well, what am I doing? Maybe I'm not treating others fairly either, right? So, especially in your personal life, this will be a time with Jupiter going retrograde in Libra where you might face some painful realities about how your frustrated hopes and disappointments, Jupiter, influences and affects your relationships. Maybe your partner has been trying, but noticing that they're always disappointing you, or that you're never content or happy or whatever, is also a contributing factor. So this is a big part of Jupiter turning retrograde March 9th for the next 4 months or so. Then the next big events come when about a week later, March 17th, we have the new moon in Pisces. Sun and moon come together in Pisces. There's a new moon early morning, and so 30-day cycle of Pisces, and of course this will be joined, that Mercury and Venus. So we'll have this 30-day cycle of, metaphysics, mysticism, perhaps escapism. This is the difficult quality of Pisces, because we become aware that to some extent, all of the work we put forth in the world, and all the people and all the families and the kids and the gurus and the career and the social, all of it ultimately adds up to a big goose egg. Meaning, it doesn't mean it's not important, but it's important. This world is important as being a platform for us to gain self-awareness. So all the stuff we wind up getting so involved in ultimately adds up to nothing. And we become aware of this in Pisces. And again, often what we want to do is just kind of escape from that, because it's like, well, then why am I alive? Then what's the point of all of this? I don't know. Well, let me just get drunk. Or get drunk on something. Hopefully at some point we get drunk on the intoxicated bliss of consciousness and awareness. And by the way, that's also what drugs and alcohol allow us to do to some extent. We're drunk on the bliss of alcohol, but actually what it's doing is it's lowering our ego, and it's actually really connecting us to something ecstatic and joyful. It's a form of soma, but it's mixed with toxin, right? So ultimately, Pisces is about the intoxication of life in our mind, but it often reveals itself as a form of escapism. So how you're escaping, or what you're escaping from and what you're escaping into, will be a big theme for the next 30 days, starting March 17th. Are you escaping from the false reality that revolves around your ego, that revolves around your sense of separateness? Are you escaping from that into something? Again, maybe it's not drugs and alcohol. Maybe it's TV. Maybe it's compulsive internet watching, binge watching of TV shows, or we all know what escapism is. We're tuning out rather than tuning in. We can also tune in to the true self and escape from the false self into something pure, right? So escaping from the falsity of the world and the short little sort of drug of, drugs, alcohol, or entertainment, or sleep. So instead of the thing that we're escaping from being impure, we escape into something pure. And rather than escaping into sleep, we escape from sleep. And we escape into wakefulness, right? So the new moon happens in the nakshatra of Purvabhadra, which is related to lightning. And this nakshatra, Purvabhadrapada, is related to lightning striking and coming down and hitting our experience. So it comes from the heavens and then gives us this shocking awareness where we wake up to reality. And it can make us kind of fanatical in some ways at times, because we have this glimpse and we're like, I've seen the light, I've seen God, I've been reborn, I'm gonna now go save the world, and get a little more fanatical than we need to. It's just a glimpse. It's just the first glimpse of who you really are. doesn't mean you've reached the goal. In fact, it's just a glimpse that should set you on the first steps of the path. Many people have never even had the glimpse. So when we get the glimpse, it's not the path, or I'm sorry, it's not the goal. It leads to the goal, which is the next nakshatras. Uttara Bhadrapada is actually where we commit to the path, we go deeper into it. And then Revati, there's liberation. So that lightning strike of inspiration will be important. Look for a spark of inspiration around the 17th, which will really set things straight and open up a new paradigm for you. So March 20th through the 21st, the moon will be in Aries and aspected by Jupiter. So now we get out of that new moon and we start, the moon starts waxing. And March 20th through the 21st, the new moon in Aries, aspected by Jupiter, a great day of inspiration, inspired purpose, new action. So it's full of inspired purpose and action, based on what uplifts you and what inspires you. So Aries is about the action, Jupiter is about the inspiration and purpose. And again, now, since Jupiter is retrograde, we're really reflecting on that purpose more now. And so the combination of Jupiter retrograde and the moon in Aries is a nice combination of reflection and action. So March 20th and the 21st, good days to really take some new action toward what inspires you. March 22nd and 23rd, Mercury turns retrograde and the moon is exalted in Taurus, right? So we have a couple interesting days there. Mercury turns retrograde in Pisces. Again, as I said earlier, Mercury's in Pisces for a couple months. And when Mercury's in Pisces, there's a lot of creative potential, but it's often, our external speech and our discrimination and our delineation of facts and whatnot gets kind of cluttered. That can be good for certain things, for certain types of imagination, especially if there are powerful planets there, like Venus. And while Venus is there, there's a lot of creativity. When Venus leaves, there's less of the discrimination and the elevation of that energy. But when Mercury turns retrograde, that's also it's not considered as difficult as it might be with a Mercury retrograde somewhere else, because the retrograde of a debilitated planet tends to negate the negative quality because we're not as likely to act upon that planetary energy at that time. So for example, the difficulty of a retrograde Mercury isn't necessarily, of a debilitated Mercury isn't necessarily bad in and of itself, but it can come out bad because we misspeak. We use the function of Mercury in a difficult way. We say the wrong things, we get confused, we might lie, we might not even know we're lying, we might confuse a lot of things. But when Mercury goes retrograde, we have less confidence with that thing. So the point is, with this Mercury retrograde for a few weeks, it's a good time to talk less and listen more, and use that internal creative quality of Mercury to find your voice, to find and to try to get the story straight, the mystical story, the metaphysical story, the stuff I'm telling you here about that I was describing relative to Pisces. And again, one reason Mercury is debilitated in Pisces is because Mercury is where we have some story. We have some story about what all this means. And the story's actually not very good. And when you put Mercury in Pisces, we're like, I don't know what the story is. We get confused about the story. So reflect on what I've been saying here about Pisces. And again, one of the good things about a retrograde planet is it's introspective. And when Mercury's retrograde, it's good for things like writing, editing, and again, honing that inner dialogue so that you understand the voice in your head much better. Right? And so rather than getting the story wrong and then escaping into unhealthy things, just reflect and listen to the story more during this Mercury retrograde cycle, which is retrograde for a few weeks, March 22nd through the middle of April. Then March 24th and 25th, the moon is in Gemini, aspected by Jupiter, Mars, and Saturn. So this makes for a lot of ideas, perhaps a bit of intellectual overload. And since Mercury is debilitated, again, be careful shooting your mouth off March 24th and 25th. Because Mercury has just gone retrograde, and now the moon is in Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury, and it's also aspected by Saturn and Mars from Sagittarius, and Jupiter from Libra. So that's a lot of energy on that moon going through Gemini. So be careful just like, exploding and, sort of misspeaking. However, you could be really inspired with a lot of ingenuity and new ideas. Again, this is really good for people who are teachers or people who like myself, who speak a lot or who guide other people through ideas. You could have a lot of inspirations, but a lot of them will be internal. You might try to speak about those things and kind of get your words all fumbled. However, those aspects of Saturn, Mars, and Jupiter are going to bring a lot of drive and passion to the Gemini area of life on March 24th and 25th. Then March 30th, the moon will be full in Virgo. So now we'll have the full moon in Virgo opposite the sun in Pisces. So that sun in Pisces started the cycle. Now the moon in Virgo is, the full moon in Virgo is anchoring and providing contrast to it to try to harmonize the metaphysical sort of confusing energy of Pisces with the grounded practical details. This is how the opposites organize themselves, right? Pisces is where we're just sort of trusting that the whole thing is going to work out because we don't really understand how it works out, so we might be sort of overwhelmed to even ponder it. So when we do ponder it, we just kind of want to escape. We realize, well, I'm just this little person. What effect do I have on the cosmos? Well, actually, we have a lot. And we feel how much influence we have in Virgo, where it's every little task, every little detail, every little decision that we make becomes important. So this full moon in Virgo will harmonize and contrast the potential escapism and the sort of potential confusion of Pisces with the literal details and the precision of every little moment and habit and routine laid out one after the next. And it happens in the nakshatra of Hasta, which literally means hand, and it shows where life situations and circumstances are all within our grasp, within the palm of our hand. But here's the thing. Once we start to then take control of those things, big keyword for Virgo, control issues maybe. Once we start to take control of things, there's a lot of attachment. This is why the goddess Kali, you've seen she has a garland of skulls, which shows all of our messed up ideas, and she has a skirt made of arms with hands attached because of our clutching. I'm attached to this life. Me, this separate person. I did it myself. See, I can do it myself. So we have these ideas. Kali wears the garland of skulls, which is all of our stupid ideas, and a skirt of arms, all of the severed actions, cutting off our arms so we can't take action anymore, so we can just be without the attachment. So there's nothing wrong with the actions. We have to take action because we've incarnated with karma, and karma is action. But we need to perform the action with detachment. This is why Hasta is an open hand. It's not a closed hand that's gripping. It's a hand that's open. This is why you always see the gods with this. It's called the Abhaya Mudra, which means I won't hurt you, and stop grabbing onto your actions. Let go. Perform your actions and let go. So that full moon, March 30th, will be in contrast to Pisces. And this is where you see the harmonizing aspect. Take action, but then let go and trust the universe. Focus your mind on the details and the things you need to do, because life is lived every moment, and the entrance point into heaven is every moment, every decision, every detail. So yes, you have total control over that, of each moment. But so perform the action, then trust that the universe knows what it's doing, because you are the universe. You are the universal being. Under the illusion of separateness. So, ponder that, and I hope you have a great March 2018.